Mm-hmm. Great. Great.
Upcoming election. With us this evening, we have Brandon Scott for mayor, Shannon Sneed for city council president, and Bill Henry for comptroller. The campaign fund is the C4 arm of Jews United for Justice and is leader-led. Our endorsement process consisted of candidate questionnaires followed up by interviews. The candidates with us tonight have proven themselves to be accountable and progressive leaders who, we believe, represent the future for a more just, equitable, and productive Baltimore. We're going to dive right in so that we have enough time for each of the candidates to introduce themselves and then answer some questions. For everyone watching, please remember to keep yourselves on mute and use the chat feature to ask any questions that you may have. We've already had a few questions that you all submitted ahead of time, and we'll hold some time at the end for a few questions from the chat to be answered. So, Council President Scott, we'll start with you. Each of you will have about 5 minutes to introduce yourselves before we turn it over to the Q&A.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I'm so used to having 90 seconds on these things. When you said 5 minutes, I just like warmed my heart. So thank you. And I won't be that long because I want to get to the Q&A. Thank you first and foremost again for your endorsement. It means the world for me. I am Brandon Scott, current city council president, candidate for mayor of Baltimore. I am a true blue Baltimorean. I grew up here, and what pushed me into public service is that I grew up in Park Heights, a neighborhood that was in Southern Park Heights, a neighborhood that was forgotten unless it was Preakness weekend. And the rest of the year, I struggled, and my family struggled, and my community struggled to be recognized as even human by our own city government. And when you live like that, it changes you. When you see your first shooting before you turn 10 years old, when you go to schools with no heat and air, when you live next to vacant houses and you have to deal with the fact that your friends are losing family members, you've seen people get shot, you've ducked bullets, it makes you make a decision whether that's how you're going to accept that life has to be, or you're going to do something to change it. I clearly thought that changing it was the best way. And who better to change it than, why should I wait, as my mom said to me, for someone else to change it? I had to be a part of that change myself. That's what pushed me in the service. Serving the city of Baltimore is the purpose that I believe I was put on this earth to do, and the only thing I've ever wanted to do with my life. And when I think about Baltimore, the only place that I've called home, I think about a city that operates with the same exact structure today in 2020 as it did in 1984, the year I was born. A $3 billion entity that still uses the same structure. And in the world that we live in today, with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, imagine how many organizations and companies have changed their structure in the last 3 months. And Baltimore City still operates the same way. So no wonder they've been ineffective at dealing with the issues, because you cannot address 21st century problems with a 19th century structure. And this is one of the things that separates me from every other candidate in the race for mayor, that they will tell you that if you just plug them into the current system, everything's going to be fine. Well, where I come from, we know that great people in broken structures are doomed to fail, and that the structure itself has to change in order for Baltimore to be better. We have to operate it in a more democratic way. We have to make it a more professional city government. We have to make it so that the Board of Estimates, which decides $500 million of contracts, is not being decided simply by me as mayor, but by the 2 other elected officials, hopefully, who will be Bill Henry and Shannon Sneed. That's what we have to do. Build a new government from top to bottom so that we can do the tough things that we know we need to do. Dealing with the disease that has been ravaging Baltimore for my entire life, and that's violent crime. Understanding that you are not going to simply solve and cure a disease by just through policing, that this is a comprehensive, needed approach. It's a cancer. You don't treat cancer by just treating one symptom. You have to try to rid yourself of the entire disease. So yes, we're going to make sure first and foremost that we have a locally controlled, constitutionally operating police department that will focus on people committing violence. But second, and more importantly, we will do the things that needed to be done a long time ago. First and foremost, how different would Baltimore be if we had fully invested in the future of our young people and not their failure when I was a kid? Meaning, fully funding our schools, how many more of my friends would be alive? How many more wouldn't be in jail? How many more wouldn't be addicted to drugs? That's what this is about. Understanding that we have deep-rooted trauma in Baltimore City, and we have to fully implement that. Understanding that we have to send people even out to the scenes of shootings and homicides who are paid, trained trauma clinicians to deal with that. Understanding the mental health issues, understanding substance abuse in Baltimore, that we lose more people to overdose even than violence, and that we have to change our approach and do that from a harm reduction standpoint. And last but not least, understanding that in Baltimore, the birthplace of housing redlining via legislation, that equity has to be the framework for how everything is done, so that we can truly, as we want to do and we talk about in our campaign, show a new way forward for Baltimore, not for some, but for all of us together. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will go to Councilman Henry. Also, I should mention that I'm gonna use a timer just to make sure that we're staying on track. So if you all get close to your time, then you'll hear a dinging, hopefully, to let you know, so I don't have to do it.
You know, it's amazing how many times it's my turn to speak. Suddenly people remember that they have a timer. But thank you. First of all, I want to thank you, not just for the endorsement, but for the opportunity to be part of this discussion tonight. Hopefully many of you know me. I'm looking at the grid view right now because I don't need to see myself. And I'm seeing a lot of friends and a lot of people who I already work for. And hopefully I'm going to be expanding that to the rest of you as well. I've been on the city council for a little over 12 years. One of the things that Brandon and I originally bonded over was the fact that we both took the same path of working as staff in the council president's office before running for city council ourselves. I got a good grounding in how city government works from working for two council presidents, Mary Pat Clark and Lawrence Bell. And in my time in between working for the council president's office and being on the council, I learned a lot working in community development over in Southeast for Patterson Park CDC. I spent 8 years working with communities to rebuild neighborhoods, literally, one house at a time, one new school at a time. All of that has come together to give me a very comprehensive approach towards how Baltimore City should work. And I'm excited about the opportunity to be the Comptroller of Baltimore City. For those of you who aren't already aware, the Comptroller is supposed to be our financial watchdog. They're supposed to be the person who keeps an eye on the mayor, makes sure that the mayor is making good deals, not just for themselves, but for the whole city. They're supposed to be keeping an eye on the city agencies, making sure that they're being effective and efficient in their operations. But most importantly, they take advantage of the fact that by being on the Board of Estimates, being on the Board of Finance, the retirement systems boards, they have access to a lot of information about the financial workings of Baltimore City. As the council president said, $500 million a year in spending goes through the board. And the comptroller is perfectly positioned to share that information with the rest of us. Because by giving us that information, by making sure the public can make informed decisions, the public can do its job of holding the mayor and the agencies accountable for what they do and for what they don't do. I'm looking forward to modernizing this office. The workflow in the comptroller's office is disturbingly similar to how it was when the current comptroller was shown how to run the office when she was first elected in 1995. As we've been dealing with the COVID-19 social distancing restrictions, it's been particularly difficult in the comptroller's office because they were not set up for telework. She still has staff people coming into City Hall because they can't do their jobs from anywhere else. And that is gone from being disappointing and inefficient to actually being dangerous to the people who work for her. I would like to make sure that we audit to greater impact. We have been doing the required number of audits based on the charter amendments that were passed last term, specifically because the comptroller wasn't using her audit power to audit agencies enough. We would like to do more of that. I think we can do more audits. And most importantly, I'd like to make sure that all of the findings are actually fully released to the public, because over the last year and a half, I've encountered too many points where the comptroller either didn't release information at all or held it back for months solely to avoid having the mayor take a PR hit. Finally, I think that the comptroller's office has been missing out on the opportunity to help provide a more equitable economy for Baltimore City. The Office of Real Estate reports to the comptroller. That's an office that can be doing more to make certain that when we provide economic development incentives for projects, that the city is actually getting what it needs to get back from that project. And I suspect that that office could be more helpful in helping the mayor set the real estate development strategy for the city, which frankly either doesn't exist or is kept such a secret that even the rest of us who are supposed to be helping run Baltimore city government have no idea what it's supposed to be. That's pretty much it. And I'm looking forward to more questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Sneed.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for hosting us tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the endorsement. I'm excited about that as well. My story is a little different. My background is broadcast and television, and so I actually got involved because I moved into my East Baltimore community, and what I saw was not what I thought it should be. So what I tried to do was connect with the council person at that time and really work with him to make it better, right? And so when I offered to write grants for the councilman, to get community involved as an organizer, he was like, people don't want that. And then I'm like, yes, we do. We have a lot of people in the neighborhoods. I only had one tree on my block when I moved in. And I'm like, if we could just help health-wise by planting trees and getting neighborhood kids involved and some of our seniors involved, we can totally make a difference. And the councilman at that time said, not interested, no. And so a group of women in the neighborhood said, you're the youngest little thing around here. You should actually run for office. And I'm like, no way. WJZ has never been late on a paycheck. I will keep writing and I'll be fine. And I came across the councilman again and still nothing. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to run for this position and be involved. And speak out. And so that's essentially how I got involved in politics. I ran the first time ever and lost by 13 votes that night, 43 altogether. And so I truly understand about just connecting with neighbors, grassroots, knocking on doors. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we can't do that. And so that's why I'm so excited to be here on this virtual, basically, town hall to talk about some of the things that we've been working on. I'm saying I'm the best person for this position. I don't even know if you saw it at the Baltimore Sun today, where we actually have we grew in the polls surge, and I'm so proud. I'm happy because I was one of the people who was virtually unknown. I hadn't run citywide ever before, and here we are. We're doing great in the polls. People are seeing our work, hearing about us, and that's so important. They know about the bills that we put in from residential requirements, saying that our top officials need to be here, live here, and then our newest bill that you guys know about, the gag order bill. Essentially, most people know it as holding our city officials accountable, especially what's happening in our police department in terms of victims of police brutality being able to speak out, knowing who the officers involved are. And so that's to me how we keep building a better Baltimore City, just working off of the legislation and the bills that we put in so far. And I'm glad to have a council president and Brandon Scott and a colleague and Bill Henry. That means so much, because together is how we put in policies and can make a difference for all of Baltimore City. So I'm still the champion of working families. I want to continue on that path, but I know it's going to take all of us to get there. So thank you all for hosting tonight again. And hopefully we'll get together and you'll tell your friends to go out and pass the word, because we all need your help to finish this race strong.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Sneed, and thank you to Councilman Henry and Council President Scott as well. From here, we're going to move into the question and answer session. We received a few questions ahead of time from Leadership Council members and questions from people in the chat. We're going to start with the questions that were asked ahead of time, though. We're a little bit limited on time, so to the candidates, if you could keep your answers to around a minute each, that would be great. So the first question, and I think some of you touched on this a bit, but just wanted to reemphasize it. You've each served or are currently serving as a city council member in Baltimore. What is the one accomplishment that you're most proud of during your time at City Hall? And we can go backwards, and I'll start with Councilwoman Sneed.
So I have to say that so far, all of my bills that I've put in have gone through. And so I'm really happy about that. Like, that's an accomplishment that many can't say. And that's under 2 different council presidents that I've been able to get bills passed. The number 1 bill I have to say that I really worked on was our residential requirements bill. I have to say we have so much talent in Baltimore City, and we know we want to grow our population. And so making jobs available, removing barriers so these brilliant minds can work right here in Baltimore City is something that I'm really proud to say.
Councilman Henry? Councilman, you're on mute.
It was first, okay, trying to get this straight, because I tried to unmute and it said you were muted by the host.
Someone was probably trying to unmute you. I apologize.
Okay. So that's a tough one. Yeah, Shannon's had a great batting record. It's enviable by anyone's standards. Over the last 12 years, I've introduced dozens of bills. In the first 2 terms, I took the let's throw it out on the stoop and see what people think approach to introducing legislation. And frankly, I was often dealing with a far more conservative council than the one I'm fortunate enough to be serving in now. And so a lot of that stuff didn't go anywhere. I think that if I had to pick just one, I would say that the rental licensure and inspection legislation that we passed earlier this term is going to have the greatest long-term impact on Baltimore, probably of any legislation that I've done. I was proud of our ability to work with advocates, work with the city agencies to come up with a program by which we can try to make certain that more people in Baltimore City are living in more dignified housing. There were too many landlords who were not maintaining their properties and relying on the fact that their tenants were too economically challenged to stand up for themselves. And the city's ability now to require inspections for rental properties are going to make it easier for us to improve the overall state of the city's housing stock over a period of time, and I'm happy about that.
Thank you, Councilman Henry. Council President Scott?
Thank you. Let me first start off by saying that now it's true that I'm not the only person that has to tell Councilman Henry that he's on mute. So that's a good thing for me. For me, this one is actually really easy. Like my colleague, I think my colleague, Councilman Henry, I came into the council as a 27-year-old young man into a council that was completely different. And actually, Councilman Henry and I were seatmates for most of my time on the council until I became council president. And we were on the bottom end of a lot of 13-2 votes together. And for me, now with this new wonderful council and being able to pass legislation that I think will, I always tell people, is what I'll be remembered for when I'm in the urn on my grandchildren's mantle, is the equity assessment program, forcing Baltimore to operate through a lens of racial, gender, and economic equity, so that we can undo the historic injustices that were done in policy in Baltimore. So that for me is something that I'm very proud of. And also I'm very proud of some of the other work outside of the city council that I did while a council person, through leading 300 Men March and helping to start the Volo City Kids Foundation as well.
Thank you, Council President Scott. Next question we have is from Ruth in Glen Oaks. It's a question for Councilwoman Sneed and Council President Scott. Many in Baltimore cannot afford to pay their rent. What do you think of rent? What do you think of rent assistance for those in need versus the sort of alternate idea of rent cancellation for all during this time? We'll start with Councilwoman Sneed.
Funny, because we just put in something very similar to this bill. It was actually sponsored by the council president. And before then, I had written a letter to some of the property managers to let them know that really, because someone had written us a letter saying, hey, we are taking off a discount for people who are late on their bills. And I said, no, that doesn't essentially help anyone. What it does is put people further in debt. So I had to go to them and explain to them why we're saying that, listen, let's cancel the rent. Let's take some of the barriers off. As an owner, you could get some of the funding back if you apply to some of these grants as a business owner, but the people who are not working won't essentially be able to make this up. And especially when you're talking about people in my district who are working 2 to 3 jobs just to make the basic ends meet. And so right now, if they're not working, they can't provide. And so it's not that I don't want people to pay their mortgages or people to pay their rent. I just understand the predicament that they're in right now. And I'm saying this, I don't know anyone who hasn't been touched by this. I'm personally affected by this. My husband is not working. And so I know firsthand what it's like to depend on 2 paychecks, but to only have 1 paycheck. The school loans are still due. The mortgage is still due. So I'm here to be a champion and say that no, I'm for it. We have to protect everyday working families, what I've been doing in Baltimore City.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sneed. Council President Scott.
Thank you. Yeah, so listen, I was proud to be the sponsor of the bill that now doesn't allow people to raise their rent during COVID. I actually, in my COVID-19 document that I released on April the 7th, I said that the mayor and the federal government should build an actual rental assistance program. I'm happy that now the mayor has said that they're going to use some of the CDBG funds to do that. And this is the right thing to do. But we also going to have to look long term, we'll see what kind of things we can come together for this, because it's not like when the COVID goes away and the state of emergency and the state of home order goes away that everyone's going to go back to work and have money just like that. It's not going to happen. That's why we have to consistently understand that we're going to have to protect people as much as possible. And there's a lot of pushback, right? A lot of pushback that we got for what we did and what we're talking about. But what folks have to understand is that it is cheaper for us to keep people in their homes than for us to have people out on the street, families, children, and all of the things that we're going to have to spend on the back end. And I know that's hard for some people to understand, but it's the right thing to do. And you can believe that I will do everything in my power now and as the next mayor of Baltimore to make sure that we are keeping people, renters, and whoever in their homes, because it also has to go to a mortgage as well.
Thank you, Council President Scott. I'm going to pass it on to Shana for the next question.
Thank you all. So this next question is also for each of you, and it's from Greg in Reservoir Hill. What ideas do you have to bring sustainable and equitable resources and development to the west side of 83? And we'll start with Councilman Henry, and then President Scott, and then Councilwoman Sneed.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, one of the things that I have felt a long time about how we handle economic development incentives in this town is we don't seem to have a plan. And I touched on this earlier. We take a very reactive approach to real estate development. Basically, we wait for a real estate developer to come to the city and say, we need help to do this. And we go, okay. Now, technically, if you ask them, they'll say, we decide yes or no right then and there. But what we ought to be doing is we ought to be proactively deciding where in Baltimore City do we want to encourage investment. And we identify the parts of town that we want to see grow in strength. And then we proactively tell the development community, if you want to get help from the city in order to develop, you need to develop here. Now, one of the things that I'm looking forward to doing as comptroller is putting more effort into the back end of development analysis. Right now, when people come to the city and they propose a development project down around the harbor or somewhere along the north-south spine, we run an analysis to make certain that the city is going to get a good return from that deal. But then after we sign off on it, it just goes away. We don't look at the deal anymore. We should be following up and continuing to do an analysis after the project is completed to find out, did they meet all the projections they were expecting to, or by any chance, did they maybe not spend as much money as they thought they were going to, such that they didn't need as large of a development incentive as they actually got. I suspect from my time in community development that in the real world, they probably have even bigger contingency budgets for these projects than we were able to afford to do as nonprofit developers. If you don't spend all of your contingency and you're a nonprofit, that's great. It goes into the next project. But if you don't spend all of your contingency and you're a for-profit, you just made more for profit. And in which case, why did the city need to be providing the same level of incentive? I want to make certain that we do those kinds of reviews. And also I want to get the Department of Real Estate more involved and more engaged with the BDC and with the housing department to make certain that it's actually a partner in trying to figure out what the city's economic development plan should be. Because frankly, if you don't have a plan, you're just at the mercy of whatever developer is going to come to you and ask for money.
Thank you. And go ahead, President Scott.
Thank you. This is a great time for this, and I know that one of my staff members is on here so he can put it into the chat for everyone. I actually released my economic development policy paper today, and it's called Building an Inclusive, Equitable Economy in Baltimore. Bill hit the nail on the head. The reason why we haven't seen that is that you haven't had the leaders, and really the leader and the mayor, who says that I'm the mayor, these are the neighborhoods that have been underinvested in. This is where we're going to build. If you want incentives, if you want things from the city, if you want the city to help you, this is where it has to go. And then you have to hold people accountable to that, right? It's about changing the way that we operate. Right now, they have this thing when people are doing development that 51% of new hires have to be people from the city. No, we're going to require that of 25% at least of every single person that works on these city contracts has to be from the city. And then again, to go back to my earlier point, you think about how the city benefits, right? The city, where we can help spur this kind of development, again, is having a plan, having a vision, saying this is what we want to do. Imagine the area near the highway to nowhere. Why can't we redevelop that neighborhood right now with the transit hub that is there, doing it in a way that does not displace residents who have lived there for generations, whose grandparents and great-grandparents were there when the highway to nowhere was built, and it never happened when it's supposed to connect to 95, right? And then they were promised a red line, and it didn't happen because the governor got mad because the city didn't vote for him. We can do things like that right now. And it just takes the courage of having leadership that says, this is what we're going to do. And not only are we going to do it that way, we're going to hold people accountable on the back end. One of the things that I get frustrated about the most, as Bill was just alluding to on the Board of Estimates, is that people aren't held accountable. They're not held accountable being in compliance with their contracts, with their deals with the city, but we don't really have a separate office of contract compliance. I'm going to create that so that we can make sure that all people are abiding by the rules, especially when it comes to local hiring, minority and women businesses, making sure they're getting what they need. And then we have to, as a city, invest in those areas as well. That's why it's important. We also know that I talked about that racial equity fund so that we can take people who are renting in these neighborhoods, making them homeowners, investing in home ownership, making sure that we're dealing with estate planning. So when we're doing that development and helping those areas come up, it does not happen like it happened in Washington, D.C. and other places. And the very people who struggle in those neighborhoods for generations are left behind and pushed out.
Thank you. Councilwoman Sneed?
Yes, I just want to add that another piece that we haven't looked at that I think my community has done a good idea is each community almost coming up with their own plan. What happens is I think we need an overall city plan, one big plan that we had, and then we need individual community plans. Because what I see what happens over and over again is we get new administrations, we get new ideas, and then they forget about the ideas that they were working on. And so the accountability, it's not there because, you know, we've been working on this plan, you've been working with the neighbors, you got the approval, but now here's a new administration. And so I think the biggest thing that we can do is, one, have a master plan for the entire Baltimore city, and then we have community plans. And when people want to come and do development, you have to fit into what we want in our communities. You have to get approval from what we want to see in our community. So that way we're not leaving it up to a developer, a person who may not know anything about our communities, but it's up to us and what we want to see. And I think that's the difference. And that way we can make sure that it's equitable, we can make sure that it's our vision because we're the ones that's living here, and that's the impact, and we'll get more buy-in when it's from us. And then I also want to make sure that we actually are using a bill that I put in that hasn't been had a hearing yet, PLAs, making sure that the people who are working on these projects are living in Baltimore City. The ones who are not trained are getting trained in our communities. It's tax dollars, it's taxpayers' dollars. And so that will also have an impact. Making sure that we're using materials that are from Maryland, and making sure that we are the procurement is actually something that's right here that we can touch and feel. And that's how we essentially put people to work. That's how we transform our neighborhoods. And that's how we keep it community-based.
Great, thank you very much. This is a question for President Scott from Carol in the Guilford neighborhood. If you are elected mayor, are there individuals, perhaps other candidates themselves or other legislators, who you are thinking about adding to your administration or your transition team?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this wonderful question, Carol. I think the best thing about the race for mayor right now is that we have a lot of qualified, smart, and most importantly, caring people about the city of Baltimore. What I say now, and I said before, actually, there's one young man who's running for mayor, Dante Swinton, that I already said that when I win, I'm going to elevate the Office of Sustainability to be in a cabinet level position and offer him that position because he's so young, so bright. And for me, I have to always reach back for people that are even younger than me because I know how it was to be that young man. But when the election is over, this is how I'm going to rebuild my team. One of the first things I'm going to do is call each and every one of my opponents and talk to them about not only them, but about their ideas, how we can work together to build the city, and then go from there. That's what we have to do. I want to assemble a team. We've had mayor after mayor after mayor after mayor in Baltimore who simply wanted to be and had to be the smartest person in the room at all times. No, where I come from, smart people are the people who surround themselves with the most rounded, best and brightest people in their disciplines, and also a team, right? I'm a middle school basketball coach, a team who can work together towards a shared goal. And that's what we're going to do. Work together towards build a team that wants to work together for a shared goal to making Baltimore a better place. So absolutely, I will talk to any and every one of them.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to go to Julia with a question.
Okay. Well, thank you. I have another question for you, Council President Scott. This is from David and Mary in Tuscany, Canterbury, and they're on the call. What would you say to people who are concerned about high property taxes and Baltimore's ability to grow its tax base?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that we're all concerned about it, right? And I know we hear a lot from a lot of my counterparts in this race saying that they're going to do it immediately. Well, listen, we all know that they have to come down. But what you will always get from me is you're going to get the honest truth and how we can do things responsibly. You heard my colleague, Councilman Henry, talk about audits, right? Audits are great. But you also heard him say that we have agencies that operate in the dark ages, essentially. So when you're auditing agencies that are using computer programs that the company that created that computer program doesn't even exist anymore, you can't even fully do that in 2020 standards because no one can communicate. One of the first things that we're going to do, we'll start to do this immediately after winning if Mayor Young plays ball, right? And if not, we'll do it within the first 100 days. Deeper than the audit, every agency is going to be assessed top to bottom, every policy, every practice, how much office space, how many computers, everything that we do. Because before you know how you can set that goal of where we need to go to lower property taxes, you actually need to know where we are. And anyone that tells you they know where the city is right now doesn't know. For example, many of us watch TV 25, and people are astounded when I tell them this. TV 25 is literally located in a building that the city used to own that we now pay rent to be in. Like, that's the kind of insane thing that you have. We have the same amount of office space in buildings that their floors and people empty. People still fill out their timesheets by hand. Then when you do that, then you do what they did in Nashville and what they did in San Francisco, and you set a bold plan of how you're going to do it, knowing what you need to do, knowing if you need to borrow on your own investments in your bonds to cover the services, if you have to work with your state government to cover services, so that we also can keep the things that people need in the city while we start to lower the property taxes and get people moving back in. But let me be clear. Also, they're not going to move until you have a mayor that are dealing with the issues, making sure that we're dealing with the violence in the city, making sure that our schools are getting better and people want to send their children there. All of that together is how we'll do it.
Well, thank you. Technology seems to be quite a theme today, too.
We are the technology. Bill and I started the technology caucus a few years ago.
Okay, that's good to hear. Okay, Betsy, I'm going to move on to you. So you get the next question.
You're muted, Betsy.
Okay, you're all running in tight races. Tell us how you're going to win, how you're going to get the votes that you need.
I'll start.
Oh, okay, Bill, start with Councilman Henry.
So I have the simplest race. I'm not saying it's the easiest, but it's definitely the most straightforward. So I have some advantages in that. The other thing is I have I was going to say I have the weakest incumbent, but then I looked up at the council president, and he may disagree. The truth is I'm running a race where the incumbent support is mostly name recognition. She doesn't have a real platform. She doesn't have any real achievements or record that she's running on. Her campaign is geared around the fact that most people don't know that this race exists, and that they will recognize her name because they have voted for her in 12 previous primaries and generals over the last 25 years. What we have learned both from the door-to-door work and from phone banking and from polling is that our message works. You know, our message is compelling. When When we tell people that if more people knew how our money was being spent, the city would spend it better, that message is compelling. And when we share that with previously undecided voters, they come over onto our side. So our campaign is very straightforwardly trying to get that message out in front of as many undecided voters as possible. Our internal polls have made it clear to us that among people who have decided that they're going to vote and who they're going to vote for, the Sun and YPR's poll notwithstanding, we're confident that people who've already made the decision to vote have made the decision largely to vote for me. But we also think that there's a lot of people out there who still need to be educated. So we have gone up on television starting this week. We have ads running on BAL. Starting next week, we're going to expand that to also include WJZ and Fox if we can get the increased donations we need to keep all that going until the June 2nd deadline. We think we can be very competitive with the incumbents' financial advantages there.
Councilwoman Sneed.
Yes, so we are using a grassroots operation, and we're also leaning on a lot of my colleagues to help as well. And so we've, during COVID, had to change our whole plan around because I am a door knocker. I love knocking on doors, but it's totally changed the game because we cannot knock on doors anymore. And we can't have these small gatherings that really make a difference. And so what we've done is change our plan around to make sure that we're on television. So I've spent a lot more time dialing for dollars and asking them to please support this campaign, because once people hear my message and see me and know me and they look up on our website, they are going to vote for me. And so that's exactly what the poll showed today. So our goal is to stay on television to the very end of this. Also to keep calling. We call nonstop all day. We're going to be using robocalls because we have to actually get out the vote. While we're not a fan of robocalls, that's what we're going to have to do since we can't knock on doors and do different things. I'm also asking my colleagues who have supported me, and I've gotten the most support out of all the people that are in the race, and I've asked them to do letters, Dear John letters. We've also asked them to do mailage for us. If they're sending something out, to please add my picture on there and a message about me. And so that really goes a long way. But I've asked our senators and our delegates who support me to connect me with people, to make phone calls. And so we are just not leaving any stone unturned. We are working grassroots, but we're actually working at a high level as well to be able to be up on television. And we were the first person, I was the first person out this race to go up on television to get our message out, and along with Mel. So we'll keep going to the very end.
Okay. Council President Scott.
Thank you. Listen, we know that my race is going to be close, right? And we know that essentially I'm tied for first in this race, but we know one thing. We know that one of my opponents has a ceiling and we believe she's hit it. We know that one of my other opponents has basically unlimited funds, but this is where the difference comes in. My campaign, and when you talk about what the next mayor of Baltimore needs to be, is a convener. I am the only person in my race that can talk to both sides of the spectrum: black, white, young, old, rich, poor, gay, straight. Everyone else has to only communicate to one group of people. And what we're able to do is do what we've been doing, telling everybody every day, making thousands and thousands of phone calls, sending thousands of text messages. Clearly, we're going to continue our great TV and media profile that actually the Baltimore Sun did a story on today, talking about how good our ads are, which has helped us grow. We know that those undecided voters are a lot more likely to break our way than anyone else, and that's why we're targeting them. We're targeting people to show them that we can, for once and for all, have leadership in Baltimore that isn't corrupt, that our future is in front of us, not behind us, and we don't have to run a divisive, dirty, negative campaign to do it. We're going to do that. We're glad to have the support of most of the labor unions. Actually, for my colleagues, just to let you guys know, we were just endorsed by the Baltimore Teachers Union during this conversation, all three of us, and having those groups go all of those groups also amplifying our message, showing that the people that are on the ground, the working people in Baltimore City, support a new way forward. And that's what we're going to do until the end.
That's great. And I have one more question for you, Council President Scott.
Sorry, Betty. I'm so sorry. We actually are running on time, so I wanted to skip this question and start. Joe's going to read one question from Allison within the chat, and then Michelle's going to ask another couple questions if we have time. And I've done a terrible job of timing everyone, so I'm going to try to do better. And when you hear the timer, please wrap it up so that, because we want to try to get, there's a lot of questions we won't get to. And we're happy to send those to the campaigns, and they can follow up with people individually. Go ahead, Joe.
This question is from Allison, who's on the line here, and it's for Council President Scott. Many of your predecessors have left their office due to controversy. How will you make an effort to keep your administration on the up and up?
Oh, this is an easy thing for me. Everyone in my administration will have to adhere by the guiding principles of me. First and foremost, citizens first. This is not, you don't get into public service to get rich. You get into public service to help people. Also, understanding this is why I got into service again. And also thinking about my record, right? My colleagues will tell you it was I that walked around getting them to sign a letter that said our former mayor should leave office. Imagining the great work that we've done in the council that was held back by my predecessor. When you're talking about reform, closing the Healthy Holly loophole, moving the Board of Ethics to be underneath the office of the Inspector General, voting to actually lower the veto threshold and veto timing that the mayor has actually vetoed, ironically. For me, this is what's important. And this is why the status quo is galvanizing behind not one, not two, not three, but 4 of my opponents. They know they can never control and own me. They know that I don't eat meat or drink, so inviting me out to some fancy restaurants not going to appease me. They know that I don't like skyboxes, so inviting me to their skybox means that I'm going to give a ticket to some kid and I'm going to sit out with the regular fans. They know that no matter what, I'm not interested in their money. I'm interested in what's best for Baltimore. And the last thing that I will do with my life is embarrass my family's name and all that they work for. When this is over and done, I have to be able to go back to the corner of Park Heights and Quantico and face the people that I grew up with and in my family.
Thank you so much, Council President Scott. With that, I think we'll pass it on to Michelle for some more questions from the chat.
Great. Thanks, Ethan, and thank you to everyone who's been writing their questions. Just given time, we'll take 1, maybe 2 of them now. And the first question we have is from Emmy, for anyone who wants to answer. No one tonight has mentioned the Baltimore Police Department. What in BPD needs to be improved or fixed, and how would you get that done?
Well, I'll just start, and Emily, I mentioned it briefly, but let me be clear. Everything needs to be fixed in the Baltimore Police Department because the department is actually broken. That's why we have a consent decree, right? We're never going to have a reformed police department in Baltimore as long as the power over it exists in Annapolis. So let's start there. 2, when you're understanding, and you know, and Councilman Henry knows, when I win, there's going to be a line at the retirement division because they know I know who they are. They know I know what they did, and I'm coming for them. Also, we have to modernize that department too. We still answer 300,000 phone calls in the 911 system a year that no other jurisdiction would answer in that way. They're not emergencies. 2, we know that the report writing is done. We finally got the police redistricting bill done, but we now have to implement that so that the boundaries and the populations and things are changed so that they can respond in a better way. And also building in better training for them. I was happy to start this training that we have with Community Mediation Baltimore and training with them and young people. We have to go further. We have to recruit, build in a program in our high schools to grow up our police department from inside our schools. Those are just a few things. And the last and most important thing is accelerate and complete the consent decree so that we have the right department for Baltimore.
Thank you. And did anyone else want to reply to that one?
No, I just want to add that we just want to make sure that why we wanted to come under the Baltimore City Council. And so that way we can, the FOP can't just put anything in their contract. And so we have more policy driven things that we want to see that would make that police department better. And we also want our Inspector General, because she's doing a great job. We want to make sure that she has the ability, like any other agency, to look at their reports and look at their books, because she doesn't have that authority right now. So we just want to be transparent and clear with all of the agencies, including the police department.
Thank you. I'm going to look to Molly. Do we have time for one more question?
Let's do it, and we'll just, I'm going to ask that folks maybe stay on for just a couple minutes after. We want to tell you about next steps.
Great, thanks. So our last question is for President Scott. What is the most difficult issue we will have to face in the city after COVID-19, and how will you set priorities in a disaster?
I think that the most difficult issue is going to be double fold, right? We know that there are going to be a lot of people without jobs, and we know that while that is existing, we're still going to continue to be dealing with, as we've done throughout COVID-19, with the epidemic of gun violence. And we're going to have to prioritize working around that, not just again through a lens of policing, but through a comprehensive way. Like I've said before, I said to the mayor, now we should be tapping into the rainy day fund now to start to train people who lost their jobs to COVID-19 that we know probably aren't coming back for the things that would be there. We have to now think about the cultural institutions that we have, thinking about like places like the theaters that we have, tap into the rainy day fund, supporting these institutions now so that we can try to keep them afloat until they're able to come back. And we're going to have to dig in deep in reimagining the way our economy works in Baltimore, but also knowing that there's going to be money coming from the feds, especially for big time projects. That's what they like to do when they come out of these things. Think about how we use that as an opportunity on multiple levels. And one thing I always want to talk about real quickly, we all talked about the digital divide because our kids are learning at home. Well, what we should do is accelerate the building of Baltimore's municipal broadband network so that we're starting in those neighborhoods where we know they need it, but also that we're hiring people that live there to help build it so that we're killing two birds with one stone, so to speak.
Thank you so much.
Great. So we are going to turn it over to Claire to close us out.
Great, thanks, Molly. Hi, I'm Claire Landers, and along with co-chair Mandy Heinel, I've had the honor to work with the Baltimore Council of the JUFJ Campaign Fund, a thoughtful, committed, really hardworking group of people who, like you, want to make sure the best possible candidates are elected to take the helm in Baltimore. We thank all of you for carving out time to tune in to JUFJ Campaign Fund's virtual house meeting tonight. And I think you understand why we're so proud to endorse Brandon Scott for mayor, Shannon Sneed for council president, and Bill Henry for comptroller. And now we hope you're inspired to join us in helping to elect these smart, progressive leaders to the 3 most powerful posts in Baltimore city government. We've all come to know so deeply that elections really, really matter. After tonight, there are only 12 days left in this election. As we come down to the June 2nd deadline, one thing that's been proven again and again, voters who haven't made up their minds ultimately are most persuaded in how they vote by the people they are closest to, their friends, their family, their social networks, because they trust them. That's why it's so urgent that you share what you've learned tonight with your circles. This election could hinge on a very slim margin. So we're going to ask you to do a couple of things tonight immediately after you click to end this call. First, we asked these campaigns what kind of help they need. And they were quite honest in saying they do need financial support. So we encourage you to donate to Brandon Scott, Shannon Sneed, and Bill Henry's campaigns online if you're able to. It will make an immediate impact. Please also consider donating to the JUFJ Campaign Fund. We still need to raise several $1,000s to cover our expenses for all the work we've done over this election cycle in the past few months. Second, fill out your own ballot tonight if you have received it. If you're still waiting, look out for it every single day and promise yourself that once it arrives in your mailbox, you'll fill it out that very same day and put it right back in the mailbox for pickup. You don't need a stamp. And please ask your friends to do the same as well. Then please follow us, the Jews United for Justice Campaign Fund, on Facebook. And when you see posts about our endorsed Baltimore candidates, please share them on your own personal Facebook page so your friends see them and know where you stand. Finally, cut and paste the link that you'll see in the chat now that Michelle Levy, our moderator, chat moderator, will be putting up. Then click and fill out the commitment form to let us know how you want to plug in to volunteer with the JUFJ Campaign Fund's phone banking and other voter mobilization efforts over the next 12 days. We can do this. It just will take people power. Thanks everybody for being with us tonight. Bye-bye.
Nice.
Thank you all so much. We'll send out a follow-up email. I didn't get a chance to write in the chat, but if you haven't gotten your ballot by like tomorrow, Saturday, please reach out to the Board of Elections and we'll send a follow-up email with that contact information for you. And thanks to the candidates for taking the time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you to the hosts and candidates. We got this. Let's all volunteer.
Yay, yay.
Gabe.
We supposed to stay or leave?
You can absolutely leave. I think that the people who, one second, I don't want to mess up the